Veteran and K9 discover abandoned mother and baby in snow. An incredible, life-changing rescue revealed. The snow fell softly, entombing the small town in a blanket of white. Holiday lights flickered cheerfully, but for Jake, they only amplified his solitude. An army vet in his late 30s, he trudged across the icy streets with Max, his loyal K9 partner. The air was thick with the smell of firewood and the sound of laughter from families gathered for the holidays. Jake's heart ached as he watched them, his mind heavy with memories and burdens of a life left behind. On this bitter winter evening, Jake and Max entered the woods, the world around them silencing. It was their routine, a small comfort in his otherwise lonely existence. But as they weaved between the glistening trees, an unexpected rustle broke the stillness. Max perked up, his ears twitching, pulling Jake toward the sound. Curiosity turned to shock when they stumbled upon a young mother, fear etched into her face. She held a fragile newborn, wrapped in a thin, tattered blanket, shivering against the biting cold. Jack's heart tightened at the sight. The two figures looked so out of place, like remnants of warmth lost in the relentless snow. He saw her hazel eyes filled with both gratitude and desperation. Before he could think, Jake knelt, extending his hand. In that moment, he felt the pull of compassion against the backdrop of potential backlash. The townsfolk he knew likely deemed her a troublemaker, a label tossed around like a snowball in their gossipy circles. But Jake had fought for honor and loyalty, across oceans and amidst the chaos of war. He couldn't turn away now. Taking a deep breath, he offered them refuge. "Come with me," he said softly, trying to mask his inner turmoil. The mother nodded, tears shining in her eyes. A silent thank you exchanged, he felt it in his bones. As he led them back to his home, whispers of judgment began to swirl in his mind. What would the neighbors think? The tight-knit community he had once cherished began to feel like a prison cell, bound by the chains of their own prejudice. Jake's own struggles resurfaced. He had faced demons before, and now, protecting this woman and her child felt like stepping into the line of fire again. Days passed, and the town's buzz grew louder, accusations flying like arrows. Why is he helping her? They say at the diner. He's just asking for trouble. Jake felt the weight of their judgment heavy on his heart, but every glance into the mother's eyes reminded him of his own fight, his own courage. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The tension hung heavy like the impending winter storm, and Jake stood at the crossroads, heart breaking with every hoot and holler from the townsfolk marching for their disdain. But then, unexpected allies emerged. Fellow veterans shared their support, standing firm beside Jake. "We've all seen battles," one would say, "and this is one worth fighting for." The holiday lights dimmed against the fierce reality of judgment, but Jake stood resolute. In the midst of the chill, a fire ignited within him, revealing the true essence of family and redemption. Just as hope seemed possible, a divisive confrontation emerged, forcing Jake and the town to face their darkest fears. Would they unite in understanding, or deepen the divide? The snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the world as Jake faced the brewing storm, wondering if acceptance and compassion could finally mend the fractures that held them apart. Jake stood by the window, gazing out at the falling snow. The world outside had transformed into a winter wonderland, but inside, the atmosphere felt charged with tension. He could hear the murmurs of town folks echoing in his mind. Each voice carried a weight, a reminder of the judgment he faced for bringing the mother and her baby into his home. The warmth of compassion was often overshadowed by the cold reality of small-town gossip. As he turned away from the window, Max nudged his leg, sensing the heaviness in his heart. The sight of the little family in the corner warmed him, but doubts lingered like clouds on an overcast day. How long could he shield them from the storm brewing outside? The sound of the doorbell jolted him from his thoughts. He opened the door cautiously, only half prepared for what awaited him. Standing there was Sarah, his old neighbor from across the street. Her arms were crossed tightly against her chest, her lips pressed into a thin line. Behind her stood a couple of other neighbors. Jake instinctively took a step back, remembering the unsaid words exchanged in the diner and at community meetings. "What are you doing, Jake?" she shot, her voice laced with disbelief. "You can't just bring strangers into our neighborhood. What if she's dangerous?" Her words felt like icy daggers, piercing through the fragile hope he had been nurturing. "She's not dangerous," Jake replied firmly, his voice steady even as his heart raced. "She's a mother in need. We all deserve compassion, especially during the holidays." The neighbors muttered amongst themselves. He could see the sympathy wavering in their eyes as they shifted uncomfortably. Jake turned his back on the growing army of judgment and walked towards the living room, gesturing for Sarah to follow. "Come, see for yourself." When they walked in, Jake heard a soft coo. The mother cradled her baby, swaying gently, while a small fire crackled in the fireplace. Her gaze met his, and he could almost feel the strength of their unspoken bond. Sarah paused, lips slowly separating as she began to process the scene before her. The little one, with tufted hair and tiny fingers, was beautiful and innocent, a stark contrast to the tension hanging thick in the air. Sarah's voice softened, uncertainty creeping in. But before she could finish her thought, a loud crash of ice splintered the cold stillness outside. Jake and Sarah turned as a group of townspeople stormed up the porch, faces twisted in anger, demanding answers. "You have no right to put our children at risk, Jake," one of them cried out. It was Mark, a figurehead of the community with a penchant for judgment. Jake's heart raced, combined fear and adrenaline coursing through him. "Enough!" he shouted, making his voice rise above the clamor. He faced them, determined to stand firm no matter the odds. "This mother and child are not a threat. They are part of our community now, and it's time we learned how to reach out instead of pushing away." A murmur of discontent rippled through the crowd, and Jake could see faces shifting from anger to uncertainty, confusion creeping in as they glanced quickly at one another. He knew he had to find the right words. The power to change minds and hearts rested in his hands. "Imagine if it were you out in that snow, without shelter," Jake implored. "What would you want from your neighbors?" Silence filled the air, heavy with contemplation. But as the stillness settled, the ground beneath Jake's feet felt shaky. While some broke away from the group, stepping closer, others stood firm against change. He felt the room closing in, the walls almost echoing his thoughts. Was his fight enough? As the two sides faced each other, hearts pounding, the lines were drawn. Would they bridge the divide? Or would the shadows of prejudice and fear swallow them whole? And in that tumultuous moment, a voice chimed in from the crowd. Families had begun to stir. But which side would they choose? Jake's heart raced as he realized that the real battle was just beginning. Would he win not just for them but for every soul hiding in the shadows this winter? The next step loomed before him, a flicker of hope in the chaos. The answer lay within the hearts of his community, but would they find the courage to change? The tense air in the living room swirled around Jake like the snowflakes outside, each one unique yet contributing to the same storm. He watched as uncertainty flickered across faces that had once seemed implacable. Sarah's brows furrowed, her mouth slightly open as if searching for the right words. But it was Mark's voice that shattered the fragile silence next. "Jake, you're being reckless." Mark's voice boomed again, filled with a bitter edge. "What happens when word gets out? You think people will clam up and forget what you've done? They'll turn against you and your family. Mark my words." Jake's heart sank at the reminder of the consequences. But then he caught sight of the mother, the way she held her baby close, shielding him as if their lives depended on it. In that moment he felt a rush of determination. What is more reckless? Opening my door to a mother in distress or closing my heart to fear? A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other as if weighing the scales of right and wrong. Jake pressed on, desperation creeping into his voice. We're better than this. We know each other. We've shared moments of joy and sorrow. Let us not let fear dictate our actions. In the back of the crowd, a woman stepped forward. It was Mary, a single mother whom Jake had known for years. "Jake's right," she said, her voice steadier than he expected. "What if it were us? What if we were the ones in need? I would hope someone has the grace to help." Some neighbors began to murmur in agreement. Jake felt a flicker of hope igniting like the fire crackling behind him. Then he met Sarah's gaze, her eyes glistening softly with understanding. "You're doing the right thing, Jake. It's hard, and I'm scared too. But sometimes we have to step into the unknown." But Mark was relentless. "You're putting us all at risk. We can't let this continue." His voice dripped with scorn, and it cut through the air like a knife. The tension in the room swelled again, thick and suffocating. The mother's gentle movements had stilled, her eyes wide with worry as she clutched her baby closer. In that moment, Jake felt an overwhelming need to protect not just her but also the growing unity in the room. "We can be stronger together," he shouted, feeling the words rise in his chest like an anthem. What kind of community turns away a mother and child? What does that say about us? With every pulse of his heart, he felt his message unraveling the knots of fear. Then, just as he thought hope might win, a loud crash echoed from outside, followed by the frantic barking of Max. The dog darted to the door and barked fiercely, sensing trouble. Moments later, a figure emerged from the shadows, a police officer, his uniform stark against the winter white. "What's going on here?" the officer boomed, looking over the group, then shifting his gaze towards Jake. Jake's throat went dry as he felt his stomach twist. "Officer, the officer raised a hand, cutting him off. "We've received calls about illegal activity here. You need to clear this gathering." Those words hung heavy in the air as Jake's heart raced anew. He realized they hadn't just been arguing about compassion. They were about to be dragged deeper into the storm brewing outside, a storm that threatened to wash away everything he fought for. The room felt colder. He searched the eyes of his neighbors, hoping to find a glimmer of solidarity, but their faces were painted with fear and uncertainty. What would they do now? Would they crumble under pressure or stand with him against the tide? And there, in that moment, a choice loomed large for Jake and for everyone gathered. Would courage prevail over fear, or would whispers of doubt drown out their resolve? The officer's eyes scanned the room, piercing through the thick air of tension. Jake felt exposed, like he was standing alone against an unstoppable force. The woman with the baby glanced up, her expression a mix of fear and pleading. All Jake could think about was her child's safety. "Wait," Sarah stepped forward, breaking the silence with her determined voice. "This isn't what it looks like. We're just trying to help." "Help?" The officer's eyebrows shot up, doubt clouding his features. "You're harboring someone who could be involved in something illegal. You understand how serious this is?" Jake took a step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "But she's a mother, just trying to find safety for her child." The officer crossed his arms, his stance uncompromising. "We're not here to discuss emotions. We're here to enforce the law. You can be charged for obstructing an investigation." A murmur rolled through the crowd, the fear in the room swelling like a wave. Did they want to protect her, or did they want to protect themselves? The older couple in the corner whispered nervously, while a few others exchanged worried glances. Jake could feel their hope flickering like a candle caught in a draft. "Please," the mother spoke softly, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to be safe. We've run so far, I don't want to go back." "Back where?" the officer asked, his tone softening slightly but still firm. Jake took a deep breath, sensing the weight of the moment. "That's just it. We don't know her story yet. We can't judge her for it." He glanced back at his neighbors, knowing this was now or never. If we let them take her, we're all complicit in her suffering. We need to stand together. Mark scoffed, standing taller, his eyes narrowing. "And if it turns out she is dangerous? Are you willing to gamble the safety of your family? Of this whole community?" A lull settled in the room, and Jake felt the tremor of indecision ripple through the crowd. He could almost hear their hearts racing, the silent debate echoing loud in everyone's minds. How far were they willing to go? Sarah moved closer to Jake, placing a tentative hand on his arm. You're right, but we need a plan. We can't just confront the police like this. Jake nodded, the flicker of determination reigniting in him. Could they really rally together? Officer, can we at least talk to her? Jake insisted, his voice steady. Find out what's really going on? The officer hesitated, glancing at the anxious faces before him. You think you can just intervene and everything will be fine? We can figure this out, another neighbor spoke up, taking a step forward. Let us hear her side. We're a community, we look out for each other, even when it's hard. The officer looked between Jake and the crowd. It was clear he was considering the weight of their unity, and for a moment, the tension seemed to hold its breath. Jake took a step forward as the world around him seemed to blur. This was more than just about the mother or the baby. It was about what their community would stand for when faced with danger. He felt the warmth of Sarah's support and saw the glimmer of hope in Mary's eyes. Please, he pressed on, let us show you that kindness matters, that our humanity matters. The officer's gaze shifted again, lingering on the mother now holding her child tightly, and Jake held his breath, waiting for the man to make a decision that could change everything. Then, the officer's features softened just a bit as he pondered. Would he take a chance on their humanity? The silence stretched, and Jake felt every second of it. How much longer could they hold on? What would become of them all if they lost this battle against fear? In that moment, a loud voice cut through the muted tension, demanding attention. What is happening here? Jake's heart raced anew as a new figure appeared in the doorway. Was this ally or enemy? The figure that stepped through the doorway was tall and imposing, with sharp features softened only by the gentle eyes that scanned the room. Jake felt a mix of hope and dread prickling at the back of his mind. The newcomer wore a blue uniform that resembled a police outfit, but was adorned with an emblem of some kind of rescue unit. Back away from the officer, the stranger commanded, taking a few steps inside. The crowd instinctively parted, a little intimidated by the urgency in his tone. Wait, Jake called out, raising his hands. We're not here to cause trouble. We're just trying to protect a mother and her child. The man paused, eyeing the scene. Protect? His brow furrowed as he turned his attention to the mother. The baby nestled against her chest. What's going on? Why are the police here? Jake couldn't help but feel a thrill of urgency in the air. This could be their chance. She's scared. She's running from something bad. We need to know her story before we make any decisions. The officer shifted his weight, looking increasingly uneasy. You're not qualified to decide that. You have no idea what she could be involved in. The newcomer stepped closer, lowering his voice slightly, like someone who understood the gravity of the situation. Then let us listen, all of us. Jake looked around, exchanging glances with Sarah and the others. They were all on the edge of despair, their breaths held in unison. If we don't hear her out, we might miss something important. She could be a victim. The officer glanced back at the man in blue. And you're saying you know that because... The man's expression hardened, the weight of his words evident. Because I have seen victims before. I've rescued people from situations worse than any of us could imagine. All I'm asking is for a moment to hear what's going on. Jake watched the officer's resolve waver. There was something in the newcomer's voice and authority that made Jake's heart swell with hope. Perhaps this was the ally they sorely needed. The mother shifted nervously, her gaze darting between the officer and the stranger. Jake felt a pang of sympathy for her. What's your name? He asked gently, trying to bridge the gap of tension. Lucas, the newcomer responded, offering a reassuring nod to the mother. I'm with a community rescue team. We're here to help. If you'll let me, I'll make sure that you and your baby are safe. What do you think? The officer muttered, glancing at their hesitant audience. Those people out there are standing with her, Lucas pointed out. That's not something you see every day. It means something, and if they are willing to risk their safety for hers, maybe it's worth hearing her out. Another surge of energy moved through the crowd, their collective breaths set on a knife edge. The tension was palpable, almost vibrating with uncertainty. Amidst the silence, Jake's voice broke through. "Please, let us just hear her." The officer hesitated, looking at the mother, then back to the crowd. They needed an opening. As each heartbeat echoed like a ticking clock, Jake felt that they were at a pivotal moment. With a clenched jaw, the officer finally nodded. "Fine, but I'm keeping my guard up. No funny business." Waiting for the mother's response, they all turned toward her. The eyes of the room were heavy with expectation. Would she trust them? Would she share her story? Just as the mother opened her mouth to speak, a sudden noise echoed from outside, shouting voices mixed with a series of rapid footsteps. Jake's stomach dropped. It didn't sound like backup. It sounded like trouble. The murmurs grew louder as anticipation shifted into dread. "What now?" someone whispered fearfully. Jake's heart raced again. Suddenly, the battle for this mother's safety felt more urgent than ever. What new danger was coming their way? Jake felt the weight of the moment press down on him. The tension in the room was electric, alive with the threat of whatever was approaching them from outside. Shouts rang out, muffled but frantic, and he could hear the pounding of footsteps on the pavement, a chaotic rhythm that sent adrenaline coursing through his veins. Lucas instinctively turned towards the noise, his expression shifting from command to concern. "Everyone stay close. We might have to make a quick move." He stepped beside the mother. A protective barrier formed with his strong presence, but Jake felt an ache of uncertainty deep in his gut. They were surrounded and exposed, and if any kind of danger was coming their way, everything was on the line. The officer seemed on high alert, his stance widening as he scanned the door. "Everyone stay calm," he barked at the crowd, but Jake could see the tremor of fear in his eyes, reflected back by the anxious faces around him. The baby cooed softly, as if unaware of the storm brewing around them, and the mother looked panicked but resolute, her heart pounding against the walls of her chest. "Please just tell us your story," Jake pleaded, his voice rising above the clamor outside. "You can trust us." The mother opened her mouth once more, breath hitching as she glanced at Lucas, as if seeking strength from him. The fleeting moment was cut short when the door slammed open violently, catching everyone off guard. The shadows of figures flooded in, reckless and aggressive, a fearsome crew on a mission. "Where is she?" a voice boomed, accusative and charged with rage. "We know she is here." The newcomers pushed through the crowd, their faces tense as they searched the faces before them, eyes darting, glancing at the mother who clutched her baby tightly. "Get back. Stay away from her," Lucas commanded, his hand gripping the radio at his side. The resolve in his voice was unshakable, but Jake could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Why? Is she a criminal?" One of the intruders sneered, an intimidating grin spreading across his face as he locked onto them. "She is no victim. She is a thief." The mother shook her head furiously, tears welling up as her anguish deepened. "No, I'm not a thief. Please." Panic soaked through her voice as she stepped slightly ahead, instinctively ready to protect her child against this sudden chaos. Jake's heart raced. He stepped forward, pushing through the crowd, instinctively stepping between the intruders and the desperate mother. "None of you know her story. You can't just waltz in here like thugs and threaten her." It felt reckless, but he had to speak up for her. The baby let out a whimper, and Jake's heart shattered a little more. The officer's arms crossed tightly over his chest, caught in an impossible situation, but there was a fierce glimmer in his eyes. "Everyone, stand down. You have no authority here. If you want to talk, you'll talk to me." The group seemed to momentarily hesitate, uncertainty creeping in with their bravado. They exchanged glances, confusion flitting across their faces as they processed the officer's stance. "Please," Jake urged the mother again, his voice softer as he leaned closer to her. "You need to tell us what is happening. Can you be trusted?" She whispered back, voice trembling. It felt like their fates hung in the balance, the air thickening with the weight of choices made and lives at risk. Just as she began to speak, the shouting intensified again outside, and the tension within the room spiraled out of control. The standoff was teetering on the edge, and Jake knew they were about to learn just how far people were willing to go for what they believed in. But would they hear her truth before it was too late? Jake could almost feel the impending storm on the horizon. As the chaos swirled around them, Jake felt a sudden surge of determination push through the fear. The mother's wide, tear-filled eyes searched his face, pleading for help. He needed to break through the storm outside, to reach the calm at its center. "Listen," he shouted, his voice rising above the noise. "We can work this out. Just give her a moment." The intruders hesitated, their bravado faltering as Lucas took a step closer, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "We don't want trouble. Just let her speak. If she has done something wrong, we'll figure it out together." The leader of the group, a burly man with a scruffy beard, was still simmering with anger but seemed caught off guard by the tension in the room. "And why would we trust you?" he spat, eyes narrowing. "Because we're human beings," Jake shot back, shaking with adrenaline. "Whatever she has done, she deserves a chance to explain herself. You can't just storm in here like this." The mother instinctively tucked her baby closer, her breath coming in sharp, frightened gasps. "Please," she murmured, voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't steal anything. I was desperate." "Desperate for what?" Lucas pressed gently, trying to keep the focus on her. I was trying to protect my child," she stammered, fear and resolve battling within her. "I didn't know where else to go. They say they want me back, but it's not safe. Not for us." Jake's chest tightened at the way her voice cracked. The weight of her words reverberated in the air, bridging the distance between the two sides of the room, those who were threatening them and those grasping at the possibility of hope. Suddenly, one of the intruders, not the leader, lowered his gaze. "What do they want with you?" he asked, curiosity peeking through his initial hostility. "I took something important, yes," she replied, her voice shaking yet steady. "But that was before I realized I was putting my baby at risk." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I did it out of fear of losing everything. They want me back, but they want to keep us safe. They never have." Jake could see the shift in the intruder's demeanor. He glanced back at his friends, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Perhaps empathy was starting to break through the walls of anger. "Are you really saying you're a victim?" the leader demanded, still doubtful but no longer bristling as fiercely. "Yes," she pleaded, voice raw. "I need help. Not just for me but for my baby." Please. Silence fell, heavy and thick, as the group processed her words. Jake felt time stretch, a fragile moment that could shatter at any second. Would they listen? Would the tide of understanding push the storm away at last? But then the door slammed open again, this time with a different urgency. A chill rushed in, and shouts echoed behind it, more forceful and demanding. Jake's heart halted. "Where is she?" A new voice roared, far angrier, far more ominous than the rest. Panic surged through Jake's veins. Time slipped away as he glanced at the mother, her fear igniting a spark of fear deep within him too. "Jake! Behind you!" Lucas shouted, his voice cutting through the haze of chaos as he positioned himself protectively in front of the mother and her baby. Jake turned just in time to see a figure barreling toward them. This was not just an intruder. This was someone who wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. The stakes had just risen. How far would they go to reclaim what they believed was theirs? And would Jake and Lucas be enough to protect the mother, the innocent bystander caught in the crossfire? As tensions threatened to explode, Jake knew that the choices they made in that instant would change everything, or would it drive them into darkness instead? The air crackled with tension. Jake's heart raced as the figure lunged, their face obscured by the darkness. He could barely make them out amidst the chaos, but the intensity of their presence sent chills down his spine. "Get away from her!" Lucas yelled, stepping forward with a fierce protective stance. The intruder skidded to a stop, surprised by the stand the two boys were taking. It was clear now. They weren't just criminals, but they were also scared. Scared of failure, scared of repercussions. "I'm not leaving without her," the newcomer barked, voice thick with desperation. The anger was still there, but beneath it lay a deeper fear. The mother held her baby tightly, her terrified eyes darting between the intruders and Jake, who sensed the threat blistering in the air. He took a step back, dragging Lucas with him. "We don't have to do this. There's no reason for violence." But the leader wasn't finished yet. "You think you can protect her? You don't even know what you're dealing with," he sneered. "I know that she's a mother trying to do what's best for her child." Jake fired back, his voice steadier than he felt. "You don't have to keep hurting her. Let us just talk." The mother's sobs echoed in the silence, and for a brief moment, the newcomer hesitated. He glanced at her, confusion flickering in his eyes. "Is that true?" he asked, lowering his voice slightly. "You're just trying to protect your kid?" "Yes," she replied, her voice trembling. "Please, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm scared, and all I want is a chance to be safe with my baby." The tension thickened again as both sides held their breath, waiting for a spark to ignite the room into violence. Felt like all the air had been sucked out, and Jake's instincts screamed at him that he needed to do something, but what? Just behind the chaos, he caught glimpses of the other intruders, whispering among themselves, doubt creeping into their eyes. They traded furtive glances, unsure of their mission now that they heard the mother's plea. Seconds felt like hours as Jake weighed his options. "You're scared too," he said softly, directing his words toward the leader. "But this isn't the way. Can't we find a better solution? For her? For all of us?" The leader seemed to flinch at the raw honesty in Jake's voice. He fumbled with his words, wavering as if Jake's plea was reaching deep inside him. "Shut up!" Another intruder shouted from the back, clearly rattled by the shift in atmosphere. "You're just trying to confuse us." "No," Jake responded earnestly, his heart pounding. "I just want to help everyone here. There's enough pain for all of us. Let us not make it worse." As if ignited by an unseen force, the youngest of the intruders, just a few years older than Jake, stepped forward. Maybe we should listen," he stammered, lowering his gaze, caught between loyalty and empathy. The leader exhaled sharply. "What are you saying?" But before the boy could respond, a siren wailed outside, growing louder by the second. The unsettling blare pierced through the noise of the confrontation, sending tremors through the room. "Cops!" Another intruder shouted, panic gripping him. "We need to get out." Jake's stomach dropped. This was not the reprieve he had hoped for. Instead, chaos erupted once more as the intruders surged in every direction, eyes wide with a burning need to escape. "Quick, we have to go," the lead intruder shouted, turning back to the mother. "If you're coming with us, now's the time." Time splintered. The air grew dense with uncertainty. Would the mother go with them, or risk it all to stay with Jake and Lucas? "Make your choice," Jake shouted, adrenaline soaring. Every second counted. The next move could change their lives forever. Would they stand their ground, or would fear dictate their path? In that moment, they all knew the truth. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the path of survival, but at what cost? The room erupted into frantic movement, shadows collapsing into themselves as the intruders scrambled. The lead figure grabbed the terrified mother by the arm, yanking her toward the exit. "Come on," he urged, looking over his shoulder as if the police sirens were already upon them. "Wait," she cried, twisting away, holding her baby even tighter. "I can't leave her." Jake's heart raced even faster. "Think, this isn't right," he shouted, desperation cutting through the noise. He couldn't let her go with them, not while he still had a chance to protect her. Lucas had taken a step forward, bravely positioning himself between the intruders and the mother. But Jake saw fear in his friend's eyes too. This was spiraling out of control. "Look, you said you needed her," Jake blurted, directing his words toward the leader. "But you can't hold her hostage. That's not how this works." She isn't a bargaining chip. The intruder hesitated again, this time looking truly conflicted. It was that flicker of doubt in his eyes, that tiny moment of humanity, that made Jake's pulse quicken with hope. But the other intruder, the one who had yelled out earlier, surged forward, breathing heavily with anger. "What are you doing?" he snarled at the leader. "We're going now." Shut up. You don't get it, the leader snapped, frustration radiating from him. I can't leave empty-handed. They'll kill me. What are you even talking about? Lucas shouted back, anger rising like flames. You think this is some kind of game? These are human lives. Enough! The leader roared, and the room went silent for a beat. It was a silence so thick it felt suffocating. In that instant, Jake noticed the baby, squirming in the tension-filled air. Its tiny face contorted in fear. The sight ripped through him like a knife. What would become of that innocent child? Please? Jake's voice softened to a whisper, nudging away from the chaos. There's still time to change. You can still walk away. Trust me, nobody has to get hurt. The leader swallowed hard, his fist clenched. In that beat of uncertainty, Jake felt the ground shift slightly under them. Time didn't just stretch. It felt as if it had fractured entirely. Behind Jake, the mother's gaze shifted from him to the leader, and Jake could see the hint of understanding mix with her fear. Just let us go, she pleaded gently, her voice a thread in the suffocating silence. You don't want this life for us, do you? The leader's jaw tightened. The sirens grew stronger, windows rattling under the pressure of their wails, and for an agonizing moment, it felt as if everything hinged on that heartbeat. Then the moment shattered. The back door burst open. 2 police officers flood in, shouts of hands in the air, ringing like thunder. No, yelled the lead intruder, scrambling backward. Get out. He started to pull the mother harshly toward the door again, flailing against the sudden chaos. Seeing the desperate action unfold, Lucas sprang into action, lunging toward them. Let her go, he yelled, tackling the lead intruder, trying to break his hold. Everything spiraled into a frenzy of limbs and shouts as the other intruders swarmed out into the night, leaving the leader fighting against Lucas. Jake's heart pounded in his ears, his instincts kicking in as he raced toward the confrontation, adrenaline fueling every movement. Get out! The intruder screamed again, panic skewing his features, but now it was him against 2 boys who weren't going to back down. Jake reached for the leader, feeling a rush of determination. You can still choose. Don't do this. But the leader's eyes were dark with desperation, and he shoved Lucas aside, making a final, desperate grasp for the mother and baby. The echoes of conflict reverberated, and just then, everything seemed to freeze as if the world held its breath, waiting for the final decision that could alter their fates forever. In that suspended moment, Jake knew this was it. What would happen next could change everything. Would they stand together, or would they be torn apart? Would they fight back against fear or let it consume them? As the weight of their choices loomed over them, the air felt alive, charged with possibility, and one question hung in the atmosphere, unanswered. What did bravery look like when the darkness closed in? The tension hung heavy like a storm cloud, electric and alive. Jake's heart pounded in sync with the chaos around him, a desperate rhythm urging him to protect the innocent mother and her child. The moment froze as Lucas pinned the leader of the intruders, each second stretching into an eternity. Would they choose violence, or would humanity prevail? Let her go, Jake shouted, forcing the words from his chest, desperately clinging to hope. The mother's fearful eyes met his, a connection igniting the courage he needed to push forward. The leader's resolve faltered for a heartbeat as he looked towards the mother, uncertainty flickering across his face. For a fleeting second, the depth of his fear and desperation shone through. I can't. They'll kill me if I leave without her, he stammered, trembling under the weight of the moment. Maybe we can help you, Lucas interjected, still grappling with the intruder, trying to find balance amid the chaos. Mr. Officer here can ensure everyone is safe, but you need to trust us enough to let her go. At those words, the room pulsed with renewed energy. Jake could see some of the other intruders hesitating, uncertainty creeping into their resolute expressions. The tide was shifting. Please, the mother pleaded, her voice a shaky whisper. We don't want any trouble. Just let us go, and we won't bother you anymore. The leader's grip slackened, just for a moment, his eyes darting between Jake and the mother. He was a man caught in a web of fear, and perhaps, just perhaps, He could be turned back to humanity. Then the sound of sirens flooded the room once again, an echoing reminder of the stakes at play. Jake took a step forward, bolstered by newfound conviction. She's just a mother trying to protect her child, just like how all of us are trying to live our lives. It doesn't have to end here. The leader's eyes softened, flickering like a candle in the wind. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, he mumbled, catching a glimpse of the baby, innocent and quiet, not even aware of the drama unfolding. Breathless anticipation filled the air. Would he break under the weight of empathy, or cling to the fear that had guided his every action? Think of your own life, of your choices, Jake urged, locking eyes with the man. You know, it's not too late to walk away from this. With a shuddering breath, the leader released the hold he'd had on the mother, who stumbled slightly but caught herself. Jake rushed to steady her, his heart racing, knowing they were still skating on the edge of a knife. Get out, now! Another intruder yelled, panic flooding through him as he eyed the advancing police officers looming just outside. The intruder glanced between Jake's fierce determination and the growing uncertainty of his comrades, and a flicker of realization dawned upon him. Let us go, he shouted, pulling away from the chaos, compelled to follow the instinct for safety. It broke open like an unseen dam. The remaining intruders followed the leader out the door, fleeing into the snowy night, their figures melting away like shadows under the moonlight. In the aftermath, silence enveloped the room, thick and heavy as the family huddled together, breaths intertwined in disbelief. It was over for now. Jake turned to the mother, her eyes sparkling with an overwhelming mixture of relief and gratitude. They had done it. They stood in the warmth of humanity, united against the dark, unyielding force of fear. But this moment wouldn't remain unchallenged. The police officer surveyed the now tranquil room, confusion still clinging to the edges of his demeanor. What just happened? He asked, gauging the palpable relief that cracked the tension in the air. Just people trying to do what's right, Jake replied, his voice a steady calm in a sea of uncertainty. We all deserve that chance. And as the police officer nodded, his expression shifting from your typical authority to understanding, the townsfolk began to step forward, a collective murmur of support rippling through the crowd. Jake, you helped save her. Sarah spoke softly, awe in her voice. Families who had initially stood on the sidelines began gathering around them, no longer mere spectators but part of the fabric of compassion, woven tightly together. He felt as if the weight of the world had shifted that snowy night. A community once torn by prejudice and scorn found its way back to empathy, where love could knit together the frayed edges of their fears. In the days that followed, Jake worked alongside Sarah and others to welcome the mother and her baby into a safe haven. They formed a tiny family, and as the holidays approached, warmth blossomed where there had once been cold indifference. Neighbors who had once gossiped began gathering to share meals, to support one another, to share their stories. Their hearts had been cracked wide open, revealing something beautiful, a sense of what community really is. Standing together, they reshaped what it meant to look out for one another, returning to the very soul of the town. Through snow and hardship, they emerged strong and united, each and every person realizing their ability to spark change. This was what bravery looked like. This was the moment they had all chosen life and love over fear and loss. So, my friends, as you've been part of this transformative journey, remember to keep spreading warmth and kindness in your own lives. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and feelings about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation, because only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Don't wait not even one more second to share. Let the light of compassion spread.